Austria. Between tranquil lakes and babbling rivers, windswept mountains and mist-shrouded forests, Austria is a playground for adventure seekers. Whether by vehicle, cable car or on foot, from atop the mighty peaks you'll feel like an eagle king beholding its realm. Follow us on our journey as we experience the polyphonic symphony of the Alps. Our road trip through Austria started in Salzburg, a city well known for its historic architecture. Instead of lingering though, we quickly left town towards several large lakes. Because it was a stormy day, the water was rather choppy. On the plus side, these conditions seemed ideal for wind and kitesurfing. Whereas the weather had already been moody, it soon took a turn for the worse. As a result, small streams quickly swelled into raging torrents. Having escaped the heavy rain, we drew near a wall of wildly jagged mountains. In the evening, the sky cleared up and the sun illuminated the lofty peaks. Early the next morning, the vista was no less dazzling, with the scenery now bathed in the light of the rising sun. To truly experience this landscape, I set off on a strenuous hike that circumnavigates the Gosau-Kamm mountain range. It did not take long until I almost stepped on an alpine salamander. These amphibians are entirely black and most active after rainfall, which explains their numerous presence on the trail. Throughout the day, I came upon 7 of these adorable critters. Carrying on, I continuously walked uphill. Towering above me were massive rock walls that are popular among both hikers and climbers. All of a sudden, I was face to face with the king of the Alps. The Alpine Ibex is a species of mountain goat that inhabits steep slopes and alpine meadows. Their brownish-grey coat blends perfectly with their environment, making them almost invisible. These animals do not shy away from snow or high altitudes, and have been found at elevations exceeding 3,000 meters. Their diet consists mostly of grass, but they also feed on herbs and shrubs. The group I encountered was exclusively male. Both sexes separate for most of the year and only come together for the breeding season. The most obvious way to tell them apart is by comparing the size of their headgear. Males use their backward curving horns for combat, but also to scratch their itchy backs. After saying farewell to these wonderful creatures, I climbed to the highest point of the trail. Descending from the pass, I was completely enveloped in clouds for the rest of the hike. The next day, the weather seemed quite similar as we drove up a winding mountain road. Luckily, the fog soon lifted, revealing a first glimpse of the Dachstein Massif. To gain a better view of this well-known peak, we boarded a cable car. Standing on top of the gondola gave us an unobstructed view of the steeply rising rock face. From the summit station, we had a magnificent view of the Hoher Dachstein. Even more impressive, however, was the ocean of clouds dancing at its feet. Of course, it is possible to climb to the peak, but that requires both experience and the right equipment. Much easier in comparison is the hike to the Mirror Lake. On a calm day, this lake entices with a brilliant reflection of the Dachstein Mountains. Leaving the central north behind, we carried on towards Obertauern. In the vicinity of this small village, we came upon a marvelous waterfall. The Johanneswasserfall plunges dramatically over a rocky outcrop. Setting this waterfall apart is the fact that you can walk behind it. This provides a very unusual perspective. To explore the area around Obertauern, we settled our backpacks for an overnight hike. Before long, we crossed bubbling creeks and walked through colorful flower meadows.
One of the great things about overnight hikes in Austria is the widespread availability of serviced mountain huts, which means that we don't need to carry a tent or even a lot of food because a fully stocked restaurant is basically waiting for us. And that in turn means that our backpacks are a lot lighter than usual, which makes these steep ascents a bit more forgiving.
This being our first multi-day hike in Austria, we definitely packed way too much. Among other things, we soon learned that we would not need our sleeping bags. For the moment, however, we were fully entranced by the fabulous nature. While soaking in the scenery on the mountain pass, we noticed some movement. Directly in front of us, a fluffy ball of fur was climbing up the rocks. The animal scaling the hillside was an Alpine Marmot. These ground-dwelling squirrels live in large colonies on high-altitude meadows. Marmots really dislike heat and will try anything to stay cool. They are most active in the morning and late evening, and even then they can often be seen cooling down on snow or rocks. These rodents have a lot of predators, which means that they are very cautious when emerging from their burrows. Once the coast is clear, they feed on different types of plants, but also on any insects they come upon. Throughout the summer, alpine marmots must gain as much weight as possible to build a thick layer of body fat. This allows them to survive the long, cold winters, which they spend hibernating in a deep burrow. Heading on, our route led across lush meadows. Soon after, we drew near the Oberhütte, the mountain hut we would spend the night at. This hut sits next to a lake in an alpine valley and is only accessible on foot or by bike. Similar to most other Austrian mountain huts, the building is both rustic and cozy. Settling in, we had our first of many Kaiserschmarren in Austria. To exercise my legs a little more, I decided to climb a nearby mountain. Initially, the summit was free of clouds, but the closer I got, the more they moved in. In the evening, we shared a hearty dinner before the warmth of the fireplace lulled us to sleep. Looking out of the windows the next morning, we discovered a world of grey. That did not bother us though when we headed out for our second day of hiking. In fact, the quiet, mist-covered landscape had quite an eerie charm. After a while, a familiar sound tore through the silence. The ringing of cowbells is inextricably linked with the Alps. Roaming freely during the summer, cows live their best lives on alpine pastures, where they feed to their heart's content. Our further route led us through more forested areas. Here, the dense fog created an enchanting ambience. Eventually, our next hut materialized out of the haze. In good mountain hut tradition, we spent the evening playing cards. The next day marked our last on the trails around Obertauern. Lucky for us, we were blessed with sunshine and a spectacular view of a cloud inversion. Looking at the glistening water of a mountain lake, we pondered how much this landscape changes throughout the seasons. In summer, the mountain flanks are a lush green, and the cool water offers a welcome reprieve from the summer heat. But only 4 months prior, the scenery had looked entirely different. Obertauern in April is a world of snow. Despite it being an exceptionally warm spring, the peaks were still clad in their white winter dress. Between November and April, millions of visitors flock to Austria for all sorts of winter sports. The most popular, of course, is downhill skiing. As Anna had never tried it before, she paired up with a ski instructor. After going over the basics and some simple exercises, it was time for her to hit the bunny hill. Further up the mountain, dopamine pulsed through my body as I flew down the slopes on a snowboard. What sets Obertauern apart from many other ski resorts is its geography, which ensures reliable snow conditions well into April. Another adrenaline-inducing winter sport is airboarding. Going up the T-bar lift on the inflated board looks utterly ridiculous, but racing down the mountain headfirst offers quite the thrill. Last day of our winter trip to Obertauern, I was tearing up the ski slope like a maniac. The reason wasn't a spontaneous outburst of madness, but Austria's biggest treasure hunt in the snow. The task is quite simple. Pick a spot, use a shovel, dig a hole and find one of 20 hidden boxes. I can confidently say that I gave it my all, even though Fortuna wasn't with me that day. The luckiest participant, on the other hand, won a brand new car. But hey, at least Lady Luck was with us when we continued our summer road trip. Most of the western half of Austria is very scenic. Both larger and smaller roads offer a plethora of stunning vistas. Throughout the day, we came upon alpine meadows, astonishingly turquoise reservoir lakes, and several impressive waterfalls. Especially quaint was the well-hidden Seebachtal. The walls of this narrow valley are adorned by numerous streams that tumble down the rock face. In comparison to the serene Seebachtal, the soundscape in the Raggerschlucht is much more boisterous. This narrow gorge was carved into the rock by a turbulent creek. Visitors get to safely explore this noisy spectacle on a series of wooden walkways.
Good morning from Hohetauern National Park, which is the home of the highest peaks of Austria. Among others, the King, the Großglockner, which looms directly ahead of me, and that is exactly the direction I'm going, because over the course of today and tomorrow I'll try to summit it, of course together with a mountain guide, as it is a serious undertaking. The weather forecast is a bit mixed. There might be quite a lot of clouds and possibly rain, so this might actually be one of the most beautiful views I'll get of the mountain, but I'll try to stay positive and simply enjoy the experience.
The first part of the trail was fairly easy and it did not take long until I arrived at the Stüdelhütte. This is where I met up with my guide Toby, who would safely lead me up the mountain. Before long, it was time to rope up. Because of the summer heat, some parts of the glacier had turned into wet slush. Fortunately, things improved as we climbed higher. For a few moments, even the sun peeked through. Eventually, only a short climbing section remained between us and our accommodation for the night. At 3,454 meters, Erzherzog-Johann-Hütte is the highest hut in Austria. Its nickname Adlersruhe, which translates to Eagle's Rest, pays homage to its lofty setting on a mountain ridge. On a clear day, the view from up here must be staggering. Getting up before sunrise, we beheld the Großglockner in all its glory. Roped up and equipped with crampons, we set out towards the peak. At this altitude, the air is noticeably thinner, which I could feel from my rapid heartbeat and labored breathing. Still, we moved swiftly up the mountain flank and only stopped to marvel at the extraordinary sunrise. Pushing on, nothing else than an exposed climbing section stood between us and the summit.
Hier kannst du dann reinsteigen. Good morning from the roof of Austria, although it is a bit tough to tell that it is actually the roof because there's quite a lot of clouds, but the sunrise was absolutely beautiful and the climb up here was quite a lot of fun. So now we're just gonna linger for a couple of minutes before we'll head safely back down again.
At 3,798 meters, the Großglockner towers above all other peaks in the country. Surprisingly, we had the rare privilege of having the summit all to ourselves. Having fully soaked in the atmosphere, it was time to head down again. Back at the Stüdelhütte, I said farewell to Toby and descended through another valley. Immediately, I found myself in a landscape that reminded me of Iceland. The vibrantly green slopes were dotted with bubbling waterfalls, while the glacier loomed above it all. Of course, the Obertauern National Park offers more adventures than just climbing the Großglockner. Aside from countless hiking trails, any of the roads leading through the area are exceptionally scenic. The most famous of all is the Großglockner-Hochalpenstraße. This winding mountain road comes with a hefty price tag, but on a clear morning, the toll is money well spent. Without a doubt, the best view opens up from Kaiser Franz Josefs Höhe. This vantage point provides an unparalleled vista of the Großglockner. Just below, we also beheld the mightiest ice dragon in Austria. With a length of 8 kilometers, the Pasterze is longer than any other glacier in the Eastern Alps. When driving this road, it is paramount to arrive early. Before 8 AM, the road is still fairly empty, but after 10, it gets extremely crowded. The highest part of the road is a narrow cobblestone section that leads to the Wildspitze. Reaching more than 2,500 meters, this point provides a sweeping view of the landscape. In the distance, we could not only make out mountain peaks, but also marvelous waterfalls. From this point on, the road led downhill, but the views hardly deteriorated. The next part of our road trip took us into several valleys branching off from the main road. Along the way, we came upon serene villages below imposing peaks, gushing waterfalls streaming down mountain flanks, and picturesque alpine lakes. One of the great things about the Austrian Alps is the diversity of hiking trails, because you can go on an easy stroll to a lakeside, or you can somewhat challenge yourself and climb up to a mountain hut. Or you can seriously push your limits and summit a high alpine peak. And today's hike to Hochkönig definitely falls in the latter category. Setting out at daybreak, the rising sun kindled the mountains with yellow fire. Climbing ever higher, I soon found myself in the landscape bare of all vegetation. The scarcity of green was more than made up for by the intense blue of several meltwater lakes. In the distance, I could also make out the hut on top of the Hochkönig. To get there, I had to scale a short section with ladders. At just below 3,000 meters, the Hochkönig can be reached without crossing a glacier. This makes it accessible for anyone with the right level of fitness and determination. Other than the loftiest peaks, we also visited the depths of the Innerbachklamm. This dark and narrow canyon is almost a bit spooky. A wooden walkway leads through the tight crevice where water droplets constantly fall from above. Much less confined but exceptionally pretty is the Kaiserklamm. Here, an emerald-colored river has cut a passage through the rock. A particularly beautiful morning brought us to the Karwendel Mountains. The weather forecast predicted this to be one of the hottest days of the year, so we set out before 7 AM. As soon as the sun hit the trail, we were sweating mightily though. Luckily, the view gave us frequent excuses to pause. After a much-deserved drink at a mountain hut, we soon arrived on an alpine pasture. An even farther view opened up from the summit of Sonjoch. At this point, the warm air was getting noticeably hazy. A great place to beat the heat is the Aachensee. This large lake is nicknamed the Tyrolean Sea, as it is suited for swimming and all sorts of water sports. Following these sweltering temperatures, it was no surprise that the weather turned into an afternoon thunderstorm. Somewhat unexpectedly though, it did not stop raining for several days. As soon as the sun returned, we set out on another hike. No visit to Austria would be complete without swimming in at least one mountain lake. With a view of the Wetterstein Massif, the Sebensee is one of the most idyllic places to freeze yourself. To warm up again, I climbed one of the more challenging peaks in the area. My reward was a fully shrouded summit with zero visibility. On the plus side, the sunset was highly spectacular. Giving it another go the next morning, I summited the Vorderer Kopf. From the top I had a fabulous view of the hut we had spent the night at, as well as several mesmerizing lakes. Standing alone on the peak, I felt like an eagle perched high up in its eyrie. Continuing our road trip, we drove all the way to Austria's northwestern border. The views along the way were nothing short of staggering. Eventually we hit water when we reached the shore of the Bodensee. This lake is another popular place to spend time at on a warm summer day.
We have just left Austria and entered one of its neighboring countries. To be precise, we entered Liechtenstein, the sixth smallest nation on Earth. And Liechtenstein is a tiny mountain principality that is wedged in between Austria and Switzerland. And that very fact makes it one of only two double landlocked countries in the world, the other one being Uzbekistan. So we don't really expect to find any ocean here, but there are beautiful mountain lakes, serene villages, and of course spectacular hikes. And that is exactly what we'll be exploring in the next couple of days.
The vast majority of Liechtenstein's 40,000 inhabitants live in the Rhine Valley. This part of the country is known for some castles, but generally speaking not overly compelling. The real magic happens in the mountains along the eastern and southern border. Nestled in an alpine valley, the village of Malbun is the perfect base to explore the highest peaks of Liechtenstein. Several hiking trails start in town before winding their way up to narrow ridgelines. On clear days, one can look far into the neighboring countries, whereas in cloudy weather, the scenery is much more mysterious. Fleeting wafts of mist dance around evergreen conifers to the age-old tune of tingling cowbells. The ballet of the fog witches reached its climax at sunset, when shafts of light pierced through the cloud cover.
This is a really cool spot to visit because the summit of this mountain marks a tri-point, meaning that the borders of three countries converge right here. On this side we have Austria, over there that's Switzerland, and right there that's Liechtenstein. But even if you don't care about such geopolitical facts, coming up here is worth in and of itself because the panorama is absolutely breathtaking.
As a tri-point, the Navkopf is one of its kind in Liechtenstein. However, most of the higher peaks mark the border with either Austria or Switzerland. An exception to that rule is the Augstenberg, which lies entirely within the confines of the country. A significantly tougher hike leads up to the Vorder Grauspitz. With 2,599 meters, this is the highest peak in the country and one of the 7 summits of the Alps. To ascend this mountain, you'll have to follow an exposed ridge without any trail markings. If you succeed, you'll be rewarded with a phenomenal vista. Austria, we drove another panorama road. The 22-kilometer-long Silvretta-Hochalpenstraße leads up to 2,000 meters, where it offers a fantastic view of the nearby mountains. Following a small trail branching off from the main road, we set up camp in what would be our favorite spot in all of Austria. It is hard to imagine a better feeling than enjoying the warmth of the sun while dipping your feet in a cold mountain stream and eating homemade Kaiserschmarren. The night sky was ablaze with lightning strokes. However, at sunrise, everything was peaceful again. This was also the best time to start a hike through the golden-hued landscape. The entire region is popular among outdoor enthusiasts. Numerous hiking trails lead through alpine valleys or up to lofty peaks, and several huts provide the opportunity to go on an extended trek. Along the way, you are guaranteed to come upon rugged rock faces, glaciers of different shapes and sizes, as well as vibrantly colored lakes. One thing to keep in mind is that many of the hikes are challenging because of their altitude gain and the rough trail surface. One of the best vistas opens up from the Wiesbadener Hütte. Here the scenery encompasses several high peaks, as well as a glaciated mountainside. Scaling the Hohes, a mountain just shy of 3,000 meters, is an arduous climb, but the experience is unforgettable. The only direction to continue our road trip was eastwards. Instead of hurrying, we explored just about every side valley we could find. One of these roads, the Kaunertal Gletscherstraße, is often called the most beautiful dead end in the Alps. Over the course of 26 kilometers, the road climbs up 1,500 meters via 29 switchbacks. One valley over, we took several gondolas to get to the highest chairlift accessible point in Austria. At just below 3,500 meters, the view was made up of jagged mountain peaks and stupendous glaciers. The Ötztaler Alpen form the largest mass elevation in the Eastern Alps. No other region has such a big area at altitudes above 3,000 meters. This is still a world of ice, where glaciers relentlessly shape the underlying rock. Snaking their way down the mountainsides, their surface is often torn apart by crevices. For that reason, most of the peaks in the area should only be climbed with ample experience or a mountain guide. A particularly interesting summit is the Wildspitze. With an elevation of 3,768 meters, it marks Austria's second highest peak. To get to its top, I joined a guided tour. A significant part of the trail led across glaciers, which meant that we were all roped up. The main reason to do so is dangerous crevasses, which are often hidden under a thin layer of snow. After a final climbing section, we arrived at the highest point of the Ötztaler Alps. The panorama from the summit was breathtaking, not only due to the thin air, but also because of the countless frost giants. The scenery was further enhanced by wisps of cloud moving quickly over the mountaintops. further east, we passed through the city of Innsbruck, looked upon large mountain valleys, and beheld several impressive waterfalls. The most scenic of these was the Grava waterfall. Flanked by a dark forest on either side, the mighty fall drops down 180 meters. The mythical charm of the landscape was further intensified by the low-hanging clouds. Once the sun had returned, we visited one of the loveliest vales in Austria. The settlement of Innerschloss at the end of the valley is straight out of a fairy tale. Above this remote village, we beheld glacier-adorned mountain peaks. With some physical exertion, one can get very close to the Schlattenkäse. This opens up an interesting view of the differently shaped blocks of ice. Additionally, a large lagoon has formed at the mouth of the glacier.
This is an immensely beautiful sight, but truth be told, this glacier is dying. In the last couple of years alone, it has lost several hundred meters of its length, and it is far from the only glacier this is happening to. In fact, most of the glaciers in the Alps are either shrinking or they have already completely disappeared. And so visiting one of these natural wonders is both a blessing and also a stark warning, because realistically speaking, in 50 years' time, there will be nothing left of this frosty giant.
Once we had our fair share of the Hohe Tauern, we headed south towards the Dolomites. The most famous mountain group of that name can be found in northern Italy. However, Austria too has a mountain chain with that name. The Lienzer Dolomites are a limestone ridge that is in no way inferior to its Italian counterpart. This region is highly popular among climbers and hikers, and exploring the local trails is time well spent. Leaving the mountainous parts of Austria behind, we started our journey through the eastern half of the country. Exchanging the awe-inspiring mountain roads for the less dramatic lowland was quite jarring at first. Fans of urban scenery will find many more towns to visit though. Graz, for example, is the second largest city in the country. Much bigger and significantly more splendid is Austria's capital. With more than 2 million inhabitants, Wien, or Vienna, is the home of every fifth Austrian. Due to its role as the imperial capital of the Austrian Empire, Vienna developed into a cultural and political stronghold. One of the best views can be had from above Schloss Schönbrunn. Another hugely famous building is the Stephansdom. This richly decorated cathedral was built between the 12th and 16th centuries. Without a doubt, the church is the main landmark of Vienna and many consider it as a national treasure. Quickly heading back to nature, we made our way to the north of the country. Here we visited the smallest national park in Austria, which is vastly different from most other parts of the country. The tranquil forest is ideal for going on a stroll or for listening to the babbling of a brook.
When most people think about Austria, they usually think about mountains, and that is a pretty fair assessment, as most of the western half of the country is dominated by lofty peaks. However, the eastern half of Austria is much more undulating or even flat. But despite that, there are still beautiful places to visit, such as Thaya National Park right here. And this is a really calm and quiet place. And it is exactly this calm and quiet that allows wildlife to flourish, such as the common otter that calls this river habitat its home.
To spot this elusive mammal, we sat down along the shore of the Thaya and watched the hypnotic flow of the water. From time to time we saw some movement, but the otter remained well hidden. After a long, patient wait, the water surface was finally broken by this formidable predator. These animals are perfectly adapted to hunting in the water, where their favorite prey is fish. After throwing a glance at a nearby castle, we continued our journey along the Danube, Austria's largest river. From there we pushed south into the very center of the country. The next morning we were enveloped by fog in a magical forest landscape. With the sun slowly rising, a serene lake emerged from the mist. The water was so calm that trees and mountains threw a sharp reflection. Even though we had just been away for a couple of days, we had immediately started to miss the alpine scenery.
With our road trip through Austria quickly coming to an end, I decided to once more punish myself severely, which means that today I'm climbing all the way to the summit of Priel, which is not the highest mountain in the Alps, but with 2,500 meters, it reigns supreme this far in the east of the Alps. And the really exhausting part is that you'll have to climb almost 2,000 meters of elevation to get to the summit. But I can already see the summit cross ahead, and so I will just keep pushing on, even though it starts to get really hot with the sun out.
Whereas most of the trail simply leads uphill, some sections require a little bit of climbing. This particular mountain range is known as the Totes Gebirge, which translates to Dead Mountains. The name derives from the fact that the higher parts of the landscape are mostly devoid of vegetation. The mountains are far from dead though, as the presence of alpine chamois vividly proved. These animals can be found anywhere from steep scree slopes to shaded forests. From the summit of the Priel, however, the name Dead Mountains was much more tangible. As we drove northwest towards the German border, the receding mountains heralded the end of our journey. After 7 weeks, driving more than 5,000 kilometers, our road trip through Austria came to a conclusion. Summer or winter, sunshine or rain, exploring this mountainous wonderland is highly addictive. The thrill of pushing your limits and conquering your fears will constantly make you yearn for more. From the highest mountaintops to the deepest gorges, Austria has enamored us with its natural beauty. And so the question is not if we return to Austria, but only when.